I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts, and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations, and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence, and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm, or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks. Chickens are happy now that they're out. Bumble's happy. She's sitting at your feet. Hopefully we'll settle down. Right, you were talking about Magna Carta.
Yes. So the Magna Carta. Now this is something that we've had, as you know, since the 13th century. And a lot of people out there are confused about the Magna Carta because they think that it doesn't exist. And that's because the 1215 Magna Carta, according to historical records, was set aside by the Pope 10 weeks after it was signed. Because, of course, it was obtained by knife point, so it was obtained under duress. So under our common law, duress vitiates consent, making any kind of consent invalid. So it was set aside.
Oh, they kind of forgot that recently, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, that's one of the points of law I'm shouting about. The duress vitiates consent. But yeah, back to the Magna Carta. So the Magna Carta was then reissued back in 1297 on the statute books, and it's still there, and it hasn't been repealed. So large sections of it have been repealed because they don't apply anymore. It was things like how you marry the knight's daughter off to another knight, and those kinds of ancient remedies that were being sought, which don't apply anymore. So a lot of it's been repealed, but the main chapters still exist. And
how many chapters were there?
Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head, 30 or 40. But there's about, as I say, the two main ones now. Has she moved it?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we were talking about Magna Carta. So I was saying that the chapters that are still alive, the main one is chapter 29, which is the one that says no free man shall be disseised of his property or of his rights, of his life, etc. And it also says that no justice will be denied to any person. Nice. Yeah, exactly. And then chapter 9 is where the freedom of the cities and the ports. And so that gives freedom to the towns as well. And then the general saving clause says that any laws that are made contrary to Magna Carta will be null and void and of no effect, which is very, very key. That's the general saving provision. And one of the reasons that people need to understand about the Magna Carta is that it was actually, it came out of the Charter of Liberties in 1100, which Henry I had to give to we the people when he was coronated. He was the grandson of William I, and William I had arrived from France and brought a whole load of the Norman laws, and had set aside some of our previous King Edward's laws, going against our law and going against his coronation oath, because there was a coronation oath in place in those times, saying that they will govern according to our laws. So when his grandson came to take the crown, we the people said, no, stay in France, we don't want you back because you're breaking our laws, you're not governing us in accordance to our laws. So he gave a charter when he finally negotiated his way back onto the throne. And that Charter of Liberties is cited at the beginning of the Magna Carta by King Edward II in 1297, confirming that he'd seen the charter and acknowledging that it binds all of him and his, predecessors and his successors in title to the crown in perpetuity, and it benefits the people in perpetuity. So, of course, when 1215 came along and King John was in breach of the Charter of Liberties, that's when the barons took him to task and said, no, you're in breach, and here's our new charter, the Magna Carta. In fact, it was called Carta Liberalis, the first one. And so he signed that under duress, as I say, but in 1297, most of the clauses were reinstated. Now, the controversial one is clause 61 from the 1215 chapter, Magna Carta, because that was the one that gave people the right to seize the palaces and the properties of the crown and hold it until the crown, stood up to their end of the bargain and governed us in accordance with our laws. So it was the right of the people, effectively. But again, if you look at that from an analytical legal point of view, you can't do that because that's not our common law. You can't seize someone's property because they haven't done something in another part of the contract. You can only provide for what's provided for in the contract. And so I would argue that Chapter 61, first of all, it's been set aside in 1215. But secondly, if it did exist under common law, even if it wasn't committed to statute, I think you'd have problems arguing that it fits in with our common law principles.
Can I just quickly interject and ask about this whole common law business? Where does that come from? And what was happening like in the 900s, 800s, 700s? I mean, the Romans were here. Did they have their law? When did common law come into play? Was it written down anywhere? Like, is it only applied to England, Scotland, or do you find common law in African countries or India? I mean,
yeah, it's an excellent question. I mean, in this jurisdiction, essentially, we upheld God's laws to begin with. So before we had, sort of natural law, God's law, and common law, it became the law that sat within God's laws, but was more of the details of it. So, for example, personal injury or marriage, what you did with property titles. So the common practices that arose between people became known as the common law.
So we're talking about what, 200, 300 AD? 200, 300
Before
AD?
that. No, before that. And in fact, what happened
But Christianity hadn't come here, so it was all pagan.
We upheld the Old Testament, though, before the New Testament came into being. And that's why the coronation oath in this country reflects that. It specifically says that the monarch must uphold the Old and the New Testament. So you're right, Christianity didn't come to Britain until about the 2nd century.
But even with the Old Testament, I mean, I thought we were pagans here.
They were as well.
Because otherwise, if they were upholding the Old Testament, they'd have to be Jewish. And I don't think this country was Jewish.
We had loads of people who, if you read the Declaration of Arbroath from Scotland, it talks about something like 30 kings, Scottish kings in succession without any English king taking any part in the monarchy. And the fact that they came from Greater Syria. And It talks about their journey through and coming up to Scotland and then fighting off the Picts who were already here. So, we've been obviously invaded and emigrated to for millennia.
We are totally a mongrel nation, aren't we?
Oh, we are, absolutely.
Wow.
What was really interesting was when the Roman Empire took off, they would obviously be going into different countries and occupying them and then having to govern them in accordance with their laws. And what they realized over time was that there were common laws amongst people of all nations. And then there are specific laws, that were particular to that jurisdiction. And so in terms of our common law, as I say, that was there before the Romans even came.
Was it written down anywhere? Is any volumes saying this is the common law of this era, of that era, or is it not written? It's just word of mouth.
Yeah, we've got laws written down from 600, 700 AD, for example, and then what was his name? The famous king. I can't remember now. At the end of the, Alfred the Great.
Good guess.
Thank you. He codified all the laws to date and added some of his own as well. So yes, they've been written down, and the Romans brought their code as well. A lot of their laws with them, which apparently they were very, very good because they had a lot of case law, which we hadn't really started developing over here. So that started the whole tradition of case law, judgments and precedents. But then really statute law didn't come into place until 13th century. I think, or maybe the 12th century was the first time we had.
What's the difference between statute law?
Well, where it's actually written down on the statute books. So you literally have books of statute law that's been written down. And you have the case law that's been written down in all the case law judgments. And then you have the laws written down in the Bible, which are God's laws. And you have the natural laws, natural justice. People inherently sense that something's not right.
And what's the weighting? And what I mean by that is people talk about natural law and common law. and they go, you know, you need to know about all these things. But then I've also spoken to lawyers and go, yeah, you know what? The natural law is real, common law is real, but these are all your rights, 100%. But if you go into any court, the judge will just laugh at you and throw you out.
That's not right. No, there's a big misconception again about common law, about its validity. We are a common law jurisdiction. It's our official law, common law.
Where does it say that?
Everywhere. And if you read any kind of judgments or anything in the law, it will tell you we are a common law jurisdiction. You only have to Google it and it will say the UK is a common law jurisdiction. So the idea that, you know, the common law is not part of our law is absolute nonsense. And that's why we rely very heavily on case law, because that's part of our common law, is the judgments made by the judges. So, for example, going back to informed consent, you know, one of our key case law on that is the Montgomery versus Lanarkshire Health Board 2015 Supreme Court judgment. And it's a judgment of Lady Hale that's particularly important. And she talks about the fact that the law of informed consent is now firmly part of English law. And she talks about how informed consent has been part of English law for quite some time, and what it looks like and what it means. And she specifically talks in that case about the fact that you must give material risks to any procedure to the patient. That case was a mother with a diabetic mother and a child, whether the child should have been born cesarean or naturally, and the risks involved. And the doctor didn't consider one of the risks to be worth mentioning, because the doctor considered it to be not a significant enough risk. And the doctor was criticised for that and said it's still a material risk and the patient has the right to know all the material risks. So that's part of the way that we do things, where we might have a piece of legislation, a statute that sets out a certain amount of the law, but then it's the cases that will delve into the law in much more detail, and the judges will give an explanation of how that law will be applied in particular situations. And then that becomes part of our common law, our case law of interpreting the law. Does that make sense?
It does.
It's really hard when you know how it works. It's really hard to know whether you're explaining it in a way that someone who doesn't know would understand it, because it is very complicated.
It is complicated. And, you know, so common law is just, it's not written down anywhere.
Yeah, well, it's written in case law judgments, for example. So what I've just said about them having to cite the material risk, that is now part of our law because it's cited by Lady Hale in that Supreme Court judgment.
But how many laws are there in common law? Like, how do you find out what your rights are under common law? Is there a textbook that you can buy that says this is common law and these are all your rights?
Essentially what you do is you start off looking at the legislation, because that's the clearest place to find a starting point. So the Human Rights Act, the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, you know, those are three primary pieces of legislation in our country, which, you know, the Magna Carta is a very broad statement. You know, you won't be imprisoned, you won't be seized of your property or your rights. And then the Bill of Rights goes into a little bit more detail. It says things like you have the right to carry, you know, to bear arms. You have the right to not to be given too many high taxes.
So hold on a second. We've got the right to bear arms?
Under the Bill of Rights, yeah. That's a whole controversial topic that we could come back and discuss that.
Like, if I wanted to bear arms, the police would come and say, where's your license? Where's your this, that, lock me up?
Yeah, you're actually only allowed to bear arms under the Bill of Rights if you're a Protestant.
No way.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. But you have to bear that in mind of what was happening at the time. Our country was absolutely in turmoil. You know, we'd had almost a century of turmoil about, you know, Catholicism versus Protestantism. And so it was complete hell with the Civil War and the Glorious Revolution. So that was very much in the context. But as you know, we don't have the right to bear arms in quite the same way anymore.
No, we don't.
So it's not quite the same issue. Anyway, that's a whole...
Wow.
That's a whole nother topic.
Okay. Right. So, and then natural law. Natural law, to me, that's really simple. You basically don't take something that's not yours. You don't harm anyone, you know, and you don't trespass in someone else's property. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. But
these kind of things?
Yeah, but what's fascinating about that is that you ask anyone from around the world and they'll probably give you the similar sort of answer. They know that it's not right to steal, it's not right to kill, it's not right to covet, etc.
Yeah.
But you have to ask yourself where that's come from. Has it come from inherently within? You know, are we naturally a moral, ethical breed? or has it come to us through generations of conditioning? And so one of the things I always do as a lawyer is go to the root law. Where's that law first been cited?
I think it's innate, isn't it?
Well,
Every
it's interesting. Well,
every child knows, and it's kind of wrong.
This because I found this really interesting. King Hammurabi was one of the kings from ancient. God, the name's gone out of my head again. Sumeria. Thank you. Sorry, I've had a bit of a difficult drive down here. My head's still boggled. Ancient Sumeria, King Hammurabi, and it's the first legal code that I've been able to identify. So that's 3,500 years ago. And it's about 128 laws. And one of them is that anybody who's caught practicing witchcraft will be tried by water.
What?
Now, most people would say that the whole witchcraft things came from the church, and it's a recent, punishment that, sick people within the church came up with. No, actually, it came from ancient Sumeria. Now, what's interesting is that when you look at the King Hammurabi's code, you could summarize it in Moses' 10 Commandments. And Moses came from ancient Arcadia, which was part of ancient Sumeria. So he would have known about King Hammurabi's laws and that code. And so again, when we hear about Moses going up onto the mountain, is it because it's come from God, which is what I would like to believe? But the secular part of me thinks, well, Moses probably also knew the Hammurabi code and was just citing the 10 simplest codes from that.
I found it. He was born in Babylon, now in Iraq, was the sixth and best known ruler of the Amorite dynasty of Babylon, noted for his surviving set of laws, once considered the oldest promulgation of laws in human history. Wow. Check him out.
Exactly. But Moses was a product of that civilization. So that's really fascinating, because what Moses did, of course, when he took the 400 odd people or however many it was out into the desert, and they spent 40 years there, the whole idea was to decondition them from the Babylonian system and give them a set of laws that they could then, start their civilization, the Israeli nation on those laws. And those are the 10 Commandments, which we are commanded to uphold in this country as part of our constitution.
Are we?
Yeah, because that's part of, the head of state. The third part of the coronation oath is to uphold the Old and New Testaments. And so we as a people are commanded to do likewise, because we as a people are in a Christian nation which upholds God's laws.
Do you know, I never ever got taught in school anything about the Magna Carta. I didn't get taught anything about the coronation oath. I didn't get taught anything about how the laws and rules have been made in this country, and what the rights are as us as individuals. And I guess I'm not surprised, because I also never got taught really how to be healthy either. They keep you in ignorance. You go to school and you're schooled, but you're not really educated and informed, are you? It's kind of bizarre.
I think it depends on your schooling and your teaching and all the rest of it. But yeah.
Clearly I went to a bad school.
But going back to the fact that you're not taught law at school, etc., and we're talking about whether it's inherent or whether it's been learned, or, one of the things is that I've concluded we actually live in a lawless society, because, as you say, nobody's taught law at school. If you've come here from another country, if you were taught law at school in your other country, you haven't been taught law of this country. So who teaches you that when you come here? So I often ask, things like taxi drivers, where have you come from? How long have you lived here? What do you know about our laws? And the conversation comes down to, well, it's inherently right. We know it's wrong to kill someone. We know it's wrong to steal. And so it hasn't been from learning it from school. It hasn't been from learning it from their particular religion. It does seem to be inherent, which I think is fascinating, and hence the idea of calling it natural, because it does seem to be natural within all of us.
I agree. I think it is very natural. I mean, look, I don't even think you need to ask taxi drivers or anything. I think you can just ask anybody on the street, even born here. Do you know any of these rules and laws and legislation? Like, no. I don't know what you're talking about. Going back to the kids, tell my kids, do you think it's right to take something from someone else? And they're like, no, Daddy. They know.
Yeah,
they don't need to tell them.
Yeah.
They know inherently. I mean, they'll try and get away with it, but they know it's wrong.
Yeah. But the state is actually in breach, or prima facie breach, of its undertaking, which is given under the main international human rights instruments. which say that the state will use maximum available resources to uphold, promote, and respect human rights. We've seen what's happened in the last 4 years. It's been a complete joke. It's been an absolute travesty rather than a joke. The violations have been absolutely horrific. But as I say, most people don't know the law. So the politicians don't know, the teachers don't know, the doctors don't know, the NHS managers don't know. It's absolutely shocking.
So educate us then. Tell us. Go through everything. And I'm telling you right now, and I'm telling you, I'm an example. Again, went through med school, not told anything about the Nuremberg Code or the Helsinki Accords or the human rights or the laws on experimentation or we were taught nothing.
Right,
Do you know that?
okay. But when you signed your contract, what did it say about upholding the law?
I have no idea.
Did you read your contract?
Are you joking?
Exactly.
I just
Most people don't even read their contract. They just sign it, right?
Listen, I'm telling you the truth. I got this contract gone as how long ago? Lots of pages, and it's like, you start reading it, and then you start getting bored, your head starts hurting, you go, yeah, I'll be a good person, right, you're going to be a good person, okay, Pete, and you just sign it.
Well,
I'll be honest with you.
You know what that amounts to?
But, I've changed. I have changed. I'm just being honest with you.
I know, and I'm grateful for your honesty, and thank you. But what it amounts to, of course, is defrauding your employer.
Oh, God.
Because what you've done is you've held yourself out as being competent to uphold the rule of law when you knew, in fact, that you couldn't. God, but rather than say to the employer, I'm sorry,
why did I invite you? Why did I invite you here?
Rather than say, I'm sorry, I can't accept this contract because I know I'm not competent to uphold the rule of law, and you'll get sued if I'm not competent to uphold it, as well as me being sued, and so we'll both be in trouble, so I better not take this job. Everyone says, I can do that, give us a job, I'll take the money. And if you're taking the money from the public purse, you're actually defrauding the public purse. And the public have put their faith in you and trust in you that you signed that contract being able to uphold it.
So say that again, when you sign that contract.
You sign a contract, that's your signature, non est factum. You can't argue it wasn't your signature, right? So you knew that you were signing a contract, and that contract had a clause in it that said you must uphold the rule of law, and you will be held personally and criminally, civilly liable for your actions and omissions.
And what about all these contracts? Like, when you're on your computer or your phone and it says update this, and then this electronic, new thing comes up that they want you to sign or accept, and you scroll through it and it's like tons and tons of paragraphs and tiny lettering, and it's like Willy Wonka and the chocolate factory. The lower down you go, the smaller print, and you're just like, oh, I'll just accept it. Like, what's that all about? Like, how
Well, that's. I would argue that a lot of those are unfair contract terms because you have no choice. It's not a fair contract there. You haven't got equal bargaining power. You've just been told that you have to sign this or you won't get the service, and there's no negotiation of any of the terms. So if that went to court, it's called a blue pencil test. What a judge would do is take a blue pencil and scrub out all of the unreasonable clauses that shouldn't be in there in the first place. But you're right. The initial contract, everyone just signs it. Everyone just ticks the box because they can't be bothered to read it. They don't understand it, and they know they can't negotiate it anyway. But going back to the employment contracts, Ahmed, this is very, very serious. Mm-hmm. Because if all the medics had actually read their employment contract and actually said to their employer, either I can't take this job, or to take this job, you're going to have to put me on an immediate training program so that I can uphold human rights, I can do informed consent, etc. But they didn't. They lied their way into the job. That's the truth of it.
It is the truth.
And so what that means is that all of the people on the ground, the patients who thought that the doctors were capable of upholding the contract, have been lied to as well. It's shocking, isn't it? And every time I've taken someone through that and challenged them, they've been ashamed because they've realised that they've signed those contracts without reading them and they've defrauded their employer or whatever.
It's not just doctors, it's everybody.
Everyone, yeah. The teachers as well. How many teachers were upholding children's human rights? They weren't. They hadn't got a clue.
So do all these contracts actually say you need to uphold the human rights? Every contract has to say that?
Well, I can't speak for every contract, but, I'm an employment lawyer and I write contracts, and, the contracts will say you must uphold the law. Absolutely. I mean, everybody's duty is to uphold the law, right? And ignorance of the law is no defense. And it's on you if you've broken the law.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's really annoying because, it's easy to say uphold the law, but when we're not taught the law and we're ignorant of the law, it's hard. How'd you say, yeah? I mean, like, yeah, you're right. But then if you go to the employer and say, you need to educate me of the law, they'll just say, oh, bugger off, we'll find someone else to sign it.
Well, I can tell you something I found out about the military, which was also horrifying.
Oh, God.
Was that I was asking the soldiers that I came across on the marches, etc., the freedom marches, said, because, I was an officer. So at Sandhurst, we were taught about the Nuremberg Code and about, the Geneva Convention. And we were told very, very, certainly that we had to teach it ourselves if we hadn't understood it, because ultimately we were going to be responsible for upholding it. And we had to discern between lawful and unlawful orders, because you don't have the right just to follow any order. You can only follow a lawful order.
Mm.
So when I met these soldiers, I said, well, have you read the law of war, the manual of from the Ministry of Defence, the manual on the law of war? No. Have you even seen it? No. Have you read the JSP 383, which is the summary of the law of war? No. So how do you know when you're out on the battlefield if you're upholding the law of war? Well, we know the rules of engagement, which is, one tiny section of the law of war, but they're not taught the rest, apparently. And I said, but surely you know that you'll be the one in a courts-martial if you end up getting it wrong. So if you don't know the law of war, why aren't you screaming from the rooftops insisting that you know it? And their answer is that it's the generals who know it and everyone else just takes their lead from the generals, which again I find shocking. Going back to the medical profession, what I've found is that a lot of the doctors, as you say, aren't even taught the Nuremberg Code or informed consent. Or if they are taught it, they're taught it by other medics. Again, why? Why haven't you brought lawyers in to teach that to the medics? And it seems to me that it needs to be a medic and a lawyer working together to teach it to newbies. Because, the practical issues of taking someone through an informed consent process can often present challenges that the legal framework is quite rigid over. But, the fact is the rigid framework is there.
So, just to tell you something shocking, I was a surgeon for God knows how many years, 25 years as a doctor, consultant for like 12, 13 years. No one ever taught me how to do informed consent. I watched other doctors, my bosses. I read the GMC guidelines, good medical practice, informed consent.
Yeah, at least you did that.
Yeah. But that was it. Like, no one actually, I don't remember ever having a lecture or official sit down and the boss telling me, this is how you do an informed consent. So,
and yet you'd be the one that gets sued if you got it wrong.
Yeah.
Didn't that terrify you?
Yeah, it was very stressful. So, I mean, the funny thing is, I was very different. So when I was consenting my patients, and the NHS and privately, I was telling my patients to record the consultation on their phone so that it would help them remember everything I said. And I would go through the pros and cons and say, you've got a choice of doing nothing. And then I would say, I want you to go away and think about it and then email me back if you want to go ahead and if you don't. And in those days, the setup was you would actually consent them on the day of surgery. And I hated that because I felt like it was coercion.
Yeah.
But you weren't allowed to bring your patient back. It was an unnecessary visit. So the NHS would say no.
Wow.
And the insurance company would also say, no, you're not allowed to bring the patient back. You have to decide whether you're doing an operation or not.
Wow.
We're not paying for extra consultations. And I'd be like, this is in both the NHS and private. I was like, this is wrong. And I was like, I want my patients to know. And the NHS said, this is a breach of data security. And I was like, what is? Them filming the consultation. I was like, no, it's not. It's theirs. They can do whatever they like. And is it true you're giving your email address and phone number if there's a problem? I was like, yeah, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be using an official hospital phone, not your personal phone. I was like, what? I mean, they were just giving me just nonsense. Because people forget. People only remember like 10, 20% of what you tell them in the consultation.
Yeah.
And what I really wanted was my patients to understand. Because I know it. Because they come to me and they go, oh, yeah, I had this operation a few years ago. I'm like, by who? Oh, I don't know. For what? I don't know. What do they do? not sure. I think there's a bit of pin in it. It's like, what? You don't even know what you have to decipher for the x-rays or whatever, or sometimes you get the notes brought over. So I was like, I don't want my patients like that. I want my patients to remember everything and have it like a record. And that's why I used to film everything. And I would do that filming consent clinic about 2-3 weeks before the surgery.
Well done.
And I would say, go away and cool off period. And if you don't want to go ahead, and I would have people who would say, yeah, when I have an operation, I'll say, right, I'll see you in 4 weeks' time for the consent appointment. They come for the consent appointment. I said, do you still want the operation? And every year, there'd be one or two that'd be like, do you know what? I don't think so. I was like, right. Why don't you think? Do you know what? I've got a lot going on in my life. I'm actually really stressed. I know I need this operation, but it's just really bad. I went, well, why don't we cancel it and reschedule at another day? And sometimes they would come back a year later. Sometimes they would come back 6 months later. Sometimes they would never come back. But the ones that did cancel and come back, they would thank me. Go, you know what? So glad you asked me that question, because I would have had the operation and it would have been a complete nightmare. And you know what? It was so good you just put the brake on it. My whole family were telling me to get the operation. I just felt like, oh my goodness, I need to do this. But when you said, do you still want? No, you can wait. I was like, oh, thank goodness.
Good.
So, I would do that kind of stuff. But this was all frowned on in the NHS, privately, because they're like, oh, why are you bringing this patient back? They just wanted you to make a quick decision.
Well, can I tell you what happened the other week? Because, as you know, I've got cancer, so I'm being treated at the moment with immunotherapy. So there I am, hooked up on a drip, and I get chatting to the woman opposite me who's also hooked up on a drip. And so we better keep this polite, given we're both hooked up. And she starts off, I say, what do you do? And she said, oh, I'm a nurse practitioner and I have been for 30 odd years. But I've been running a vaccine clinic and I've been the informed consent lead. She said, what do you do? And I said, can I just ask you a bit more about what you do? And she was saying, I'm very, very proud. I've saved thousands of lives and, it's just been an amazing experience. And, I'm so glad that we were able to produce such an amazing vaccine. And so she said again, what do you do? And I said, well, actually, I'm a lawyer and I specialize in human rights and informed consent, etc. And I've been very concerned about whether, in fact, informed consent has been given or gained rather across the board. And she said, why? What are your concerns? And I said, well, for example, did you know every single one of the ingredients of the Pfizer vaccine wasn't disclosed on the patient information leaflet? She looked shocked. And I said that was confirmed by the MHRA in response to a Freedom of Information request, where they confirmed that there were undisclosed ingredients and that they were going to remain undisclosed because they were commercial secrets. In which case, Ahmed, as you know, how can you take a patient through all of those ingredients if you yourself don't even know what they are?
It's impossible.
Exactly. Not only that, I said to her, but also of the 11 ingredients that are named on the Comirnaty patient information leaflet, it specifically says you must be allergy tested against every single one of the 11 ingredients, including BN162B, which is the active ingredient in Comirnaty. So I spoke to my doctor friends, because I work in this multidisciplinary team twice a week, medical doctors for COVID ethics, and there are over 1,000 of us now. So doctors from all over the world.
With Stephen Frost?
Yeah, Stephen Frost. Exactly.
I love him.
He's fantastic, isn't he?
He's such a good friend. He's honestly one of my best friends now.
He's wonderful. He's
lovely human being. Hero, exactly.
Yeah. Shout out to you, Stephen.
Yeah, exactly. Legend.
He is. Well, anyway, I asked the doctors, I said, so have you all been allergy testing for the ingredients? No. How would you do the allergy test? Well, it hadn't even been thought about or discussed. So that's not being done. And we know that people have died from anaphylactic reaction from the injections, and we know that they've had anaphylactic response and not died. But were they allergy tested? And I said to her, also, it seemed to me that a lot of the places weren't giving an individual clinical risk assessment. And again, she looked shocked. And I said that, again, it's required. It specifically says you must have an individual clinical risk assessment. And it talks about having it done before, so you're not doing it at the time of the...
That's what they did to me.
Yeah.
Anna, I walked in with my T-shirt like this. Look at my hairy arms, right? And I like, look at the tan line. Not bad, eh? So basically, I rolled up my sleeve and I was like, so, can you tell me what's in this jab? And I could hear them in the back, like, doing something. And they're like, oh, it's the mRNA. And I was like, but what's the thing about the lipid nanoparticle? Can you tell me what the risks are? And they went, no, it's really safe. And then the next thing I felt, just bang, in my arm. I was like, you done it? They went, yeah. I was like,
what the hell?
And I was like, I thought we were going to have a consent thing.
Yeah.
They were like, but you're here. And I went,
Again,
what?
that's another misunderstanding.
So I was like, just because I've pitched up, that's implied consent you're using. They're like, yeah.
No, again, the law doesn't allow for that.
And I was absolutely shocked. And I went and sat in my car and had a little cry.
Oh, bless you.
Because there's 30 minutes of weakness, Anna. 30 minutes of weakness. I'll be honest with you. I'm not perfect. Messed up. My own demons.
I remember you telling me, and I'm so sorry.
Bullshit. It's bullshit.
Well, I went on to say to her, there has to be an individual clinical risk assessment. So was that being done? And again, she looked shocked and horrified. And she said, well, we didn't have time. We were having loads and loads of people and, it was only 5 minutes per person. I said, but the law doesn't allow for that. The law doesn't say, oh, well, if you're too busy or if you haven't got enough resources or if it's in the middle of a pandemic, you don't have to go through all of this. The law is very, very strict. And so it became clear to me that even on asking those few questions from this lead of informed consent, that they weren't giving proper informed consent. And again, I questioned her. I said, well, who taught you the informed consent? And she looked horrified and said, well, other medics and I teach it. And I said, well, with respect, how do you know that you're teaching it properly if you're not a qualified lawyer and you haven't been taught by a lawyer yourself? How do you know you're actually teaching it properly? And she was very good, actually. She said, yes. She said, it sounds to me like you need to phone around some of the universities and make sure that they have, in fact, got some lawyers in to teach some of this stuff.
Well, how do you feel about this? So I've got Eden Bieber. His podcasts are coming out tomorrow and the day after. And the first one is about the Pfizer contract. Let me just explain what happened there. He's found some Pfizer contracts on the internet by accident, but they're the real deal. Have you noticed that they're not available to everyone to look at?
Yeah, and they've been heavily redacted as well.
Exactly, heavily. And why would you hide the truth? You would think you'd celebrate it, you'd want to talk about it and scream it from the rooftops. I think lies need to lie in the shadows and be hidden, because when you're exposed to the light to them, they fall apart. So anyway, this contract he found, and he said it's blanket uniform across the world with all the governments, basically hands over everything to these corporations. They say to the government, you cannot sue us or any of our distributors or any of our manufacturers, researchers, injectors, vaccinators. You will not be able to sue us for anything or anyone associated with the product or its delivery or its distribution, anything like that. It gives a blanket check to everybody anywhere, and it says, you've indemnified us. You can't get us. One, I didn't understand why any government on the planet would ever sign up to a stupid contract like that. And two, is that actually valid? Is that the case now because the government signed this contract that none of us can sue Pfizer or Moderna, because of this stupid deal that they struck?
No. So essentially, no. The way the law works, to start with, there's the law of equity, which means that both parties have to come to a contract with clean hands and in good faith and with honesty. So if you enter into a contract in those terms, then an indemnity may stand up because it's fair enough to be indemnified for against something that could not be your fault. So, for example, if you've manufactured something, the moment it leaves your depot and it's in transit, if there are problems in transit, that can't be your fault. So you get an indemnity against any problems in transit. Or if there's a problem in distribution or in the way it's being manufactured by somebody else. So it's perfectly normal to provide indemnities so that you limit the amount of your liability quite reasonably. And then the liability passes over to the next in the chain, etc. So that if you were the claimant, you would then be able to sue the next person for whom they would be liable. Okay, so
got that.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So an indemnity won't stand just because it's written there. It'll be examined to be, first of all, was it fair to begin with? And we know now that a lot of these contracts weren't entered into in good faith, that there has been fraud, that there has been duress, etc. So I would argue that a lot of those indemnities won't stand.
But it's really difficult because you're taking on both Big Pfizer and Big Pharma and the government, and they've got plenty of money.
No worries about that. I've fought the government before. I've fought big companies before. I'm not scared.
But they've got the money. And what I'm saying, hiring a lawyer costs money.
Yeah.
And the legal system, it seems like when it comes to law, everyone profits. The judges, the court system, the lawyers, except the people who are at the bottom. They like divorce.
Yeah.
The lawyers love a difficult divorce.
Yeah.
They don't want an amicable divorce.
Yeah.
That means they don't get paid that much.
Yeah, I'm not one of those lawyers, I hasten to add. I am not. Because I've been self-employed for 20 odd years. So a lot of the work that I do is on a no-win, no-fee pro bono, as well as pro bono. So I'm not one of those lawyers. But yeah, most lawyers are. They're in the big corporate law firms on that business barrel, essentially. But yeah, I've been reading a lot about people saying that you can't be sued. That's not true. Anyone can be sued. Their defence is that they're indemnified or whatever, but then that indemnity has to stand up in court. So,
but the other thing is when you sue these people, if you don't win, don't you end up having to pay their fees?
Well, it depends what court, what action you're bringing and how the court costs work. There's not a blanket rule for that. So for an employment tribunal, for example, you don't always pay the other side's costs, even if you lose. So it just depends on the framework that's being applied. But yes, typically if you go to court and you lose, then you're liable for the other side's costs, which puts a lot of people off litigating. And you're right, one of the problems with litigating someone like Big Pharma or the government is that they've got such deep pockets, and one of their litigation tactics is to drag it out, is to bleed the litigant dry. But for example, in employment law, one of the things I tell my clients is that they've often got insurance under their household contents insurance. Most people aren't aware of that. But you've got cover for your employment disputes. And I love phoning up somewhere like the Home Office or, a big organisation and saying, you think my client's going to give in, they're insured, or I'm doing it pro bono, or I'm doing it on a no-win, no-fee. And it changes the litigation landscape completely because they can't then use money as a way of bullying someone.
See, I hate this. You've just confirmed what I always thought. The bullying, the intimidation, the dragging it at, the sapping of your energy, the stress that's involved. Anyway, listen, we need to...
It's lawfare. It is lawfare.
That's it. Lawfare. Do you know what someone told me? He's in tech, and I was he's just visiting, and I was meeting up with him. He's actually one of my supporters. He said, I'm in town. Can we meet up? I was like, yeah, man. I love this. I love this community that I've now got. He's come over from Switzerland, and I hung out with him at lunchtime. Anyway, so basically he was saying that he had a dispute with a big tech company. And his lawyer said, listen, he's American. He said, look, don't worry about it. It's nothing personal. They do this all the time. It costs too much money and time to develop this tech in-house. So they steal it from other people, even though it's not right. They know you're going to have to go through the court process to prove it. They're going to drag it out. It's going to cost you a lot of money and bankrupt you. So your company's gone out of business, which is great because another competitor at the window. And even if you win, it's taken such a long time that by that point, everything's moved on and they can carry on. They can afford. And I was like, wow. And he goes, yeah, it's just dirty business. And they use the law against you. Lawfare. It's really quite sad. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about. We've got to talk. I mean, have we finished about Magna Carta common law? I'm still, can I be honest with you? The whole common law, natural law, it's still a haze. Yeah. I still don't know. I think it's because I learn things from looking at things and doing things. I'm a visual person. And if you just said, look, Ahmed, here are the common law principles. Here's the natural law principles. These are your rights as an individual in this nation. I'd be like, great, boom, I've got it sorted. But right now it's still in the ether.
Yeah. Well, what I've offered to do is start running some courses on it so that I can break it down for people because obviously I can't teach everything in one go. No. It's a huge amount. But yes, I'd like, I'm doing a talk on Tuesday, for example, up in Buxton. And that's talking about sovereignty and, what it means and what our human rights are essentially, in a nutshell, and how you uphold them. And that's what I need to be doing, is to be running online courses.
Get a Substack up and get paid subscribers and do Zooms, weekly Zooms, fortnightly Zooms.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about that as well, because you need to raise money for your fund.
Yes.
Quickly mention that, and then we're going to go for tea and then do part 2.
Okay. Yeah, everyone, as you know, I've got cancer, and that's meant I haven't been able to work as my normal job as a litigator for quite some time now. So I've had to set up a crowdfunder, because a lot of the treatments that I'm being advised to have cost quite a lot of money, like the intravenous vitamin C injections. They're like £350, £500 an injection, I'm being told. And the hyperbaric oxygen therapy and the supplements and the organic food. It's all just costing a lot of money, which I just can't generate for myself at the moment. So I'd be very grateful if anyone does find my work useful, if they wouldn't mind dumping a little bit into my donation, into my crowdfunder rather.
And it'll be on the link in the show notes, but just say it out loud. Like, what is the link, the crowdfunder?
Yeah, I've chosen Give, Send, Go, because we had problems with the other ones, didn't we, with the way they treated the truckers, etc. So I've chosen Give, Send, Go. But there's also PayPal. I know lots of people don't like PayPal, but some people don't like Give, Send, Go either. So I've given 3 options there.
So Give, Send, Go, Anna de Buisseret. You Google that and you'll find, or look at the show notes and it'll be in there.
Yeah, and PayPal is just my name, annadebuisseret@gmail.com. If anyone wants to send money any other way, just email me and I can give you some other ways to pay, but they would be so helpful. I'm so grateful. And I really hate to ask for money, but if I was well enough, I'd be earning it myself and I wouldn't need to ask. But I'm doing what I can with the health I've got.
100%. Listen, look, it was Jack Wilkinson in December said to me, Ahmed, you need to ask your listeners for money. And I feel embarrassed. I feel like, you're going out with your begging bowl. Oh, can you buy me a coffee? Subscribe to my subs. And he was like, Ahmed, no, but you're doing a service. You're providing, you're doing a job. Like, you shouldn't think of it like you're doing a charity thing. And I like the fact he said that to me. And I was like, okay, I'm going to ask. So everybody, support Anna. Anna, look, my wife's going to get upset if we don't go in now because dinner's ready. And then we'll come back and do part 2, okay?
Brilliant.
All right. Okay, so anyway, we're back now. I hope that was all right. Was it tasty?
It was lovely. Thank you very much. Very tasty.
It's actually quite unusual because, I would say about 60-70% of the time I actually do the cooking.
Oh, good on you.
But my wife really enjoys cooking too.
Good.
We both like cooking.
Teamwork. Yeah,
ideally, if we're both cooking at the same time and helping each other, that's what we love the most. Oh. But sometimes, she works now full time, so I'm stay-at-home dad. So I end up doing 70% of the meals, and weekends she tends to do then, which is nice. Anyway, so let's wrap up on what we were saying about where we can find the law and everything. Yeah. And
I was saying it's very difficult because obviously there are lots of different places to find the law, and especially because we've got our English law, we've got Scottish law, we've got Irish law, and we've got international law. So, of course, it depends where you are also as to what law you're looking up. But if you're in England, for example, and you want to find out your human rights, then, as I say, the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, the Human Rights Act, those are the 3 primary bits of legislation that you can find if you go onto www.legislation.gov.uk. That's where all the statute law is kept and the regulations. And so you can actually, the statutory instruments, etc. So they've got a title bar there, search bar. You can put the title if you know the title, like Bill of Rights. If you don't, then you can put in a search term like human rights and all the human rights laws will come up. But in terms of common law, you would then need to look at the case law that's governing that, and how you find the cases that go to a particular point is one of the tricky things because, in a way you need to know the case name in order to be able to find it. How do you search on, for example, informed consent laws? The case comes up depending on your search engine. So if you're a lawyer, for example, you're typically, a member of something like LexisNexis, where you can search and these various sources of law will come up. But if you're Joe Public using Google, then it's obviously going to be a bit trickier.
Very tricky. This is what I mean. Like, so in the olden days, the medics here, in the UK used to keep everything in Latin.
Yeah.
And there was a famous physician, Nicholas Culpeper, and he translated all that Latin information, how to make potions and herbal treatments into plain English. Guess who he fell foul of? The medical establishment.
Yeah.
They're like, how do you because we want people to come to us, to pay us to interpret and decipher all of this knowledge. And you've just given it away for free so that everyone can understand. And I feel like lawyers do that a bit. They hold on to the knowledge and deprive us of it so that, whoever knowledge is power.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like that personally. That's
No, I'm not saying you.
No, I know. But personally, I'm passionate on everybody learning the law, because if everybody knew the law, we wouldn't be living in a lawless nation. And I, for one, would be a lot happier. So I'm dead keen on it. I'm not so sure about its gatekeeping as such. I think it's just the fact that it is actually really difficult to take some of the complex ideas. And
what about legalese?
Well, exactly. I mean, I remember, for example, when I was a commercial property lawyer for a short time, and, you had to, there was a term, you had to use your reasonable endeavours to keep the property in good good repair order. And I remember one of my clients saying, well, what does reasonable endeavours mean? Can't you turn that into some kind of legalese? I mean, simple English, rather, it's legalese. And I said, but the problem is with some of those terms, like that particular term, for example, it's already been decided in a particular court case. And so it has already been defined in that court case. So it's a defined term. So if I use any other term, it's then in dispute again. And you're then, going to end up in court again to say, well, what exactly does that phrase mean? So there's terminology like that the reason it's used is because it's already gone through the mill of being defined.
I get that. What about Black Law's Dictionary or whatever? What's that all about?
Well, again, it's a dictionary that literally tells you certain meaning of the word, for example, safe. If you want to know what the legal definition of safe is, then you can look in somewhere like Black Law's Dictionary and it will tell you. And I think the definition is something that won't cause you any harm. So immediately the idea of these injections being safe and effective, according to Black Law's Dictionary, they would fall foul because it's not safe because it has risks, and there are material risks, including death. So, that's a joke to call it safe in accordance with Black's Law. But going back to the human rights law, because I want to make sure that everyone gets this, when I've been out on the streets and saying to people, you need to look up these laws, and they've said the same kind of thing, well, where do I find it? What I've said is, if you go onto Google, you can literally put in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, and it will come up. And it's 3 pages or something. And that's written in very simple English because it's meant to be for everyone around the world to be able to understand without being a lawyer. And then you've got the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, 1966. That's really important. Again, it's written in...
International what, sorry?
The International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, 1966.
Okay, got it.
And then there's the International Covenant of Economic and Social and Cultural Rights.
I mean, how would anybody know to look this up?
Well, exactly, because you're hearing me telling you.
International Covenant
of, I can never remember whether it's cultural, economic and social rights.
On economic, social and cultural rights.
Right, yeah, the other way around. Yeah, again, 1966. And these contain more rights that weren't necessarily gone into a great deal of detail in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So essentially the history of this, can I just digress slightly?
Please do.
So what happened, as you know, at the end of the war, was that all these breaches of human rights came to light, as well as all the breaches of the law of war. And when the powers that be conducted various investigations, and they looked at the medical schools, for example, and they found that none of them were being required to take a Hippocratic oath. And they were looking at the laws, for example, and wondering how the German constitution allowed for such horrendous laws to be put in place. And obviously what came out of it was a whole raft of new laws because the powers that be realised that there was gaps in all of the existing legal framework. So one of the things that was put in place was the Nuremberg Code in 1947, which set out the 10 basic principles for informed consent. And then in 1948, there was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And then in 1950, the European Commission Declaration of Human Rights, which is enshrined in our Human Rights Act. And we actually were very resistant to introducing the Human Rights Act until 1998, because Britain's argument was that our common law gave us our rights, and our Bill of Rights already gave us our rights, and we didn't need all of these international laws. But in fact, what's happened is since these international laws and the Human Rights Act have come about, there's been a huge raft of case law that's come out of it. And it turns out we very much did need it all written
Really?
down. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's funny. I've heard some people say that actually human rights is not great. We don't want human rights. We want individual rights.
So it's the same thing, essentially. And there is a confusion there because a lot of people seem to think that collective rights outweigh individual rights, and that's not the case. Certainly in this jurisdiction, the individual rights are just as important as the collective rights, and it's always a balance of rights. And that's one thing I want to mention, actually, whilst I think about it. A lot of people seem to misunderstand the fact that you can't set aside human rights in a pandemic, a global pandemic. A lot of people are saying, oh, well, they're allowed to do all of this because there was a global pandemic. No. I think it's Article 4 of the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights specifically says that you can't set aside these rights, even in a global health threat threatening the life of the nation. They're non-derogable.
But that's the whole point of these laws and rules, that actually in times of crises, there's things there to protect the public.
Exactly.
I mean, it doesn't make sense that, when it's great, that's when we apply it. Well, no, you don't actually need it then. When you really need it is in times of war, crisis, to protect yourself from an overreaching government.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. It doesn't.
Exactly.
That argument doesn't even make sense to me.
And this is shocking, but you don't have the right to take somebody's life, even in wartime. Okay, the only person who's allowed to take another life is a soldier who's acting under lawful orders and has taken a life in accordance with the principles of war and the law of war. So if you don't get to take a life even in wartime, the idea of being able to take a life during the global health pandemic is even more ridiculous. Exactly. And the reason I talk about taking a life is because we each have the right to life, and that means that we have the right to sovereignty over our own body. We get to choose what's put in our body, what treatment we have, etc., because that goes to our right to life. It also goes to our right not to be tortured or given cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. And it's been ruled by the courts that giving medical treatment without consent is a form of degrading, cruel or treatment or punishment. And if you think about it, that must be right. But again, it's like with the right to take a life. If someone came at you at the end of a corridor, darkened corridor, with a gun or a knife or a machete or an injection full of something or other, those are all weapons. Each of those can be used to take your life. And so the idea, as I say, that somehow it's okay to do it by using an injection, but it's not okay to do it using any other means is ridiculous. It doesn't add up.
It is ridiculous. Okay, right. You're also going to write about this in your Substack.
Yes, I am. I've just started my Substack, so I'm hoping to get that off the ground soon.
What's the name of it?
I think I've just called it Anna de Buisseret at the moment.
Perfect. Fine.
Nothing very imaginative.
That's right. So next, right now in the press, there's a lot of hoo-ha about doctors taking money and pushing jabs. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was in med school, I was told that it's against the GMC rules to be promoting and advertising medical services or products.
Yeah.
I can't actually find that now. I tried looking for it and I couldn't find it. But that's what I was always taught. And that's why you don't ever hear doctors here in the UK anyway saying, come to my clinic and I'll do an amazing hernia repair, blah, blah, blah. But we just don't do that.
Yeah.
But what I found really strange was during the pandemic, so I can't call it pandemic. Sorry, I really can't.
Agreed.
Just can't. During this pandemic, suddenly you had all these doctors with, some of them with crazy eyes, as the doctor was like, she's so manic. And like, just crazy people pushing these jabs on Instagram, on Twitter, on Morning Breakfast TV. And I thought, how's this possible? This doesn't seem like they're doing the ethical thing, but GMC never came down on them and no one told them you're not allowed to do this. And now it's come to light that there might have been some conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
What's your take on all that?
Well, I was initially horrified when these doctors were promoting these jabs. First of all, I was horrified because, as you said, my understanding was that they were not allowed to. Secondly, my understanding was that they had to make it abundantly clear that they were in fact being, paid or receiving some other remuneration in kind of some sort or other to promote the jabs. And they have to do that up front so that people know, if you've got a car salesman selling you a car, you know what their deal is. If they're telling you that, they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, it's another story altogether. And, you need to be told where they're coming from. So the idea that the doctors shouldn't have to disclose their conflicts of interest is a nonsense. And the GMC does have in fact, I think I've got it here somewhere. Oh, I can't. But anyway, yeah, there's a bit in there where it says that, you must declare these conflicts of interest. And I think it's Dr. Ranj has now come out and said that he's being attacked on social media. And he wanted to clarify that the 22,500 that he'd received from AstraZeneca was in relation to promoting a childhood vaccine, apparently, and not the COVID vaccine. But the question still arises, do you bite the hand that feeds you? And is he really going to criticize AstraZeneca over one jab and promote it over another jab? It just doesn't add up. And apparently the Mail, etc., have now done an article saying, has he disclosed it, and if not, why not? And I think that's what everybody wants to hear. Why not? Why wasn't this disclosed up front?
And also, I heard there's another doctor who set up a company just before the pandemic, or at the time of the pandemic, when the vaccines were, just before the vaccines were rolled out, so November, December 2020. And at their 1 year, company has, record accounts, they suddenly had £1.2 million in the account. And I'm like, I could learn a thing or two from you. Like, what is it you did in a year, a new business, that suddenly you got 1.2 million in your bank account?
Yeah.
And this is a famous, TV doctor. And you're just like,
where's that coming from?
That's pretty lucrative. And the thing is, I don't even think you need to be just paid. I think a lot of doctors would have been happy with, maybe, I mean, it's done in weird and wonderful ways. You could have had a producer say, we really like you, by the way, Anna, on our show. You're very popular. And you go, thanks, Ahmed. Yeah, I think it'd be great, because the public trusts you, that, you talk about how great these vaccines are, in this time of crisis. Don't you think so, Anna? Don't you think so? Because, we'd hate to lose you, and, we'd like to keep you here. I'm just saying, devil's advocate, like, sometimes it might not even be money in your pocket.
Yeah.
People want the fame. People want the attention. I've gone on Twitter and I've seen their bios. TV doctor to ITV, Good Morning, blah, blah, blah. They're proud of it. And they don't want to lose that gig. It's, it's a big thing for them.
But what I don't understand is how they felt that they were able to promote them, given the lack of information they had at the time. So they knew there was no medium to long-term safety data.
But the government said it was safe and effective.
But they have a duty as an individual.
I know, I'm just...
I know. But just for our audience, in case, people aren't sure about that. No, the individual doctor has an absolute duty to ensure, as I say, that he abides by the law of informed consent. And so to go on there advertising that this product is safe and effective because the government's told them that is a nonsense. They should have done their own research, and a basic, risk assessment would say there's no medium to long-term safety data, therefore we can't make representations about its safety. We're going to have to highlight that to people. And they didn't.
I think honestly, there's a lot of conflicts of interest. A lot of people have research and research grants coming from these big pharma institutions, whether you look at Oxford or Imperial. And I found that the biggest proponents of the vaccines and the biggest critics of the dissidents were those doctors who had conflicts of interest and had, sticky fingers. Their research, their status, their position, their raison d'etre all depended on them pushing the jabs. And it's a big problem. Even AstraZeneca, you look at the people who designed the drug, promoted it, sold it. There's 3 dames now. And a lot of conflicts.
Barbie doll. One of them has a Barbie doll made after.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflicts. There's a lot of conflicts of interest there. And, I think people need to look into it a little bit more. Debbie Evans, UK column, is doing a whole series on this, and naming and shaming everyone and bringing the receipts. And I think it's really important. And a lot of it stems from Oxford. A lot of things go on in Oxford, that I don't think are above, are legit. And, even take, for example, the JCVI, Joint Committee of Vaccine Immunization. They're meant to decide whether a vaccine should be rolled out and whether it should be given to children or pregnant women or whatever. And if you look at who's on the panel, they're all professors in vaccinology, vaccine development, blah, blah, blah. It's like asking the fox to guard the chicken coop. And it's like,
Exactly.
and the argument that you get told is, oh, but we need the experts to determine, well, I can tell you a fox is an expert at chickens. Like, and not even that. They love chickens. Like, they really, really love chickens. So because they're an expert and really love chickens, we should get the fox guarding the chicken coop. That's the argument they're using. It's bullshit. Isn't bullshit?
It is bullshit.
Bullshit.
The doctors themselves were charging, they were being paid £22.50, as I understand it, per jab.
Yeah.
And more if they went to someone's home, and then it was another tenner or something, I seem to recall. So again, but I'm told that the doctors weren't getting that in their own pockets. It was going to the practice. But my understanding is that the practice is divided up amongst doctors. So isn't it effectively the same thing?
It's the same thing. So it's two different things. I think if you went to a vaccine center and were injecting, you were getting paid, I think, potentially for that as well. So you're paid by shot. If you're a vaccinator, and then if you're a practice giving the vaccines, and this is everything, flu vaccine and whatever, MMR, you get a quota, you get quaff, you get individual tariff for each injection. There's all these different things. And then, the profit shared amongst practice. And I've spoken to GPs and they talk about how a practice could make, an extra £150,000 that year. And that's a lot of money for them, and divvy it up amongst 2, 3, 4 partners, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is.
And they're like, thank you very much. We'll take that. And I think a lot of it was the money.
It certainly seems that way. It does seem that way. It's very difficult not to assume that money has been a major factor in all of this, especially with the TV doctors. I think it's horrific, to be honest. I don't know how they sleep at night.
I don't know either. That's the honest truth. I think if you are a narcissist or a psychopath, you actually don't think like the rest of us, and you don't actually, it doesn't bother you. They actually sleep quite well. That's the sad reality. I think people like you and me would struggle to go to sleep and be twisting and turning in bed. I think they sleep quite well. That's a sad reality. So what about the government now? Like, how do we hold this government to account then? Because as far as I'm concerned, they've broken all the laws, and they don't seem to be serving us, the people who voted them in. Apparently, they seem to be serving other masters. How do you hold these people to account?
Well, again, the process that we've advised people to go through, and I say we, the lawyers who have brainstormed this, and when I say the lawyers, I'm talking about the UK lawyers and globally as well, because when I've been working with these multidisciplinary teams, a number of those have been lawyers from different jurisdictions, and obviously we've been despairing at how to bring justice to the situation, given that that's our job. And so initially I was quite hopeful that, we'd go through the various processes and, it would come to something. But here we are 4 years down the line, and it's just horrific. Because essentially what's happened is that we've identified the perpetrators in the government, served them with notices of liability, which has set out all the breaches of law that we think that they're prima facie guilty of.
What does prima facie mean?
On the face of it. On the face of it. So on the face of it, they've breached all these laws. And then we've cited the evidence to support, the breaches and the harms it's causing, and then said cease and desist. And, you are on notice now that you are liable for all your actions and omissions and all the harms that have been caused from your decisions. Now, those notices were served on all the MPs. And as I understand it, virtually none of them took any notice of it or took any, legal advice. I know Boris Johnson did, and I know Matt Hancock did, because we had some feedback from that. But as far as I'm aware, most of the other MPs seem to have ignored it altogether. But more fool them, because the fact is, it's on file that they were told that they were breaking the law as of that date. So they can't, plead plausible deniability. They can't say they didn't know. But then, of course, it's going to the police and saying these people are, guilty of, on the face of it, of committing these crimes. Can you investigate? And they refuse to. And they say you've got to take it up with the MPs. And the MPs say if there was any problem, the police would be investigating. And it's come out of the Scottish inquiry that the chief constable there has ordered the police not to investigate any complaints to do with COVID or the pandemic whatsoever, especially the injections. And that's coming out across the world. Police forces around the world have been instructed not to investigate any of these reported crimes, which is unbelievable.
That's shocking.
It's absolutely outrageous.
So hold on. Doctors are not protecting the patients. The police is not protecting the public. And the politicians are not serving the populace. What the hell?
I know.
What do we do now?
We've got a complete, as far as I can see, we've got a complete breakdown. Law isn't happening. Justice isn't happening.
So this is what I mean. Like, it's great that you wrote this letter and you're saying cease and desist. But on its own, if that's not doing anything, what's left?
Well, exactly. Well, you can sue them, obviously. You can take them to court individually. If you've suffered direct harm and loss and you can prove that it was as a direct consequence of inaction or omission of your MP, there, as a living man or woman under common law, you can sue them. And you can sue them in their, public capacity. But as we were talking, you've got to have the funds. You've got to find a lawyer who's willing to do it. We've got 184,000 lawyers in the UK. How many of you heard stand up against the pandemic and take
I don't know.
cases?
Tell me how many have.
Well, handfuls. Literally. Most people have only heard two or three, can only name two or three lawyers that
Name them.
speak up.
Name them.
Well, Lord Sumption was one of the first, Jonathan Sumption. He was the first to come out against the lockdowns and say, these are horrendous breaches. And then Francis Hoare was taking the case with Simon Dolan. Stephen Jackson, as you know, has been helping you and others with law or fiction. Philip Hyland from BJH Law. He's helped Dr. Sam White, when he was being investigated by the GMC. And then there's Lois Bayliss of Yorkshire Law, who's doing a lot of really good work with the, notice of liability for the schools and things. And then I'm beginning to run out of names. Molly Kingsley, Us for Them. She's been a fantastic lawyer.
Is she a lawyer?
Yeah, she's a lawyer.
I don't know if she was a lawyer.
But yeah, you start to run out of names after that. Can't think of many more.
180,000 lawyers.
184,000 roughly, yeah.
And there's 16,000 barristers. So you've got one barrister at 16,000. You've got
two, Lord Sumption and Francis Hoare.
So two barristers at 16,000, and you've got about 8 lawyers out of 180,000.
164,000, yeah, I think.
All right, so there's something like 370,000 registered doctors. I'd say it's like very similar. How many doctors do you know? It's
horrific, isn't it? It's just shocking. I mean, I have to pinch myself every day when I realise I'm one of so few lawyers standing up. And you must feel the same as a doctor.
I don't know about you, but sometimes I think maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe I'm the one with the problem.
No, I've never thought that, to be honest.
I have. And then, it lasts, for a little while, and then I'll go, no, I'm not. I'm right. These guys have all lost the plot, and they're evil or stupid or ignorant or spineless. It's just...
Well, it's interesting, actually, because, as you know, I believe in God. And I think one of the reasons that I've been made to go through this cancer journey is because I'm at the hands and the mercy of lots of medics. And it gives me the opportunity to talk to them about what's happened over the last 4 years. And what's been shocking for me is that virtually every medic has said, they didn't want to take the injection. They didn't want to wear a mask. They didn't want to do all this stuff. But it was the management that was bullying them and coercing them. And so they lay the blame there rather than at each other's feet, which is very interesting. Because I have to say, all the staff that I've worked with have been lovely without exception. You can't imagine them being anything but nice.
But, yes and no. So what I mean by that is people need to take personal responsibility. And it's not good enough to just point fingers at some other people. It's the manager's fault. If just enough doctors stood up and went, no, we're not doing this. This is a complete breach of medical ethics. Absolutely not. If enough police officers went, we're not enforcing this. This goes against all the rules and laws of our land. We're not some dictatorial authoritarian regime. If the politicians did that, the whole thing would have fallen apart. But you know what? No, their silence was complicit. I'm sorry, that's my opinion, right? I'm sorry, it's not good enough. Ain't good enough.
Well, I have to say I agree with you from that point of view. It's just that, when you look into these faces of these nurses and these doctors and you think they're just, Joe Bloggs trying to do their job. And I start to feel sorry for them. And then I'm reminded of the consequence of them not doing their job properly. And it literally is disability and death. And you then have to say, well...
What's the saying? Evil flourishes when good people do nothing?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. And also the banality of evil. The fact that everyone thinks that, evil people will be obvious to spot and their deeds are so obviously evil. But in fact, there is a banality. It's the common or garden person. and doing something that people don't actually even necessarily realize is evil, like the woman running the informed consent clinics, not giving the individual risk assessments and not seeing that as a necessary problem.
This is one of the things I say, that the vast majority of the evil that's carried out in the world isn't actually directly by the evil cabal, whoever they might be. It's the majority of people.
The order followers.
Yeah, order followers. The people who think they're good, they're the ones who are executing it. And that sometimes when I've got a dark day, right, I think humanity deserves its lot. We deserve to be in this position because you know what? We allowed it to happen. If we had spine, if we had critical thinking, if we were our own masters, if we were responsible, we would have said, no way, get lost. But we've given all of our power to these evil people. So what do you expect? If you're going to act like a sheep, are you surprised you're going to get slaughtered? If you act like a lion, well, they're not going to do that to you. But, we're not living in a land of lions anymore. It's just sheep.
Well, when I was out on the marches, one of the things that really struck me was a number of people who were desperate to do something, to stand up and to speak out, to take action, etc. But they just didn't know what to do. They didn't know the process to go through. They didn't know the laws to cite. They didn't know how to put up a fight.
I think 15-20% of people were excellent, and just said no. We need to invert that so that it's in future, it's always going to be 80% people who are awake and are critically thinking, and the 20% of people are like, oh no, I'll follow orders. How do we flip it? And I think when humanity flips like that, and the majority of people are wise and smart, that's when humanity and civilization can really transcend, and humanity can reach a new level where it's never been to. But as long as the majority are always just going to follow like a herd, we're kind of doomed to this predator class because they know how to play us. Have us fighting amongst each other, distracted, bread and circus, you name it. We need to get past this because I feel like humanity just keeps going around this cycle and it gets really bad, and then some good people come along and lay down the rules and laws, and then there's a time of peace and prosperity, and then it all goes pear-shaped again. And then it just keeps going round and round.
Well, exactly. I mean, lest we never forget, right? Lest we ever forget. When I feel so heartbroken because when I'm one of the only people I've met who's actually read the Nuremberg judgments, and I've repeatedly put it out on social media, hands up, anyone else who's read them. And I've come across one other lawyer who has, and one doctor who claimed he had, but nobody else. And I think, they spent all that time, those lawyers and that court, trying to bring justice to the situation. There's an awful lot of criticism that's levied at the way the Nuremberg trials were handled, but the overall intent was very honourable. We want to bring these people through a trial rather than just shoot them, rather than just put them in prison without a trial, because we want to, find out what happened, record it, give people the chance to give their witness evidence, have it all out in the open, and then identify the laws that are missing and, make amends. But unless you actually read the judgments, what's the point of all of that?
Okay, listen, I'll be honest with you. I did look up the Nuremberg Code after we met at that showing of playing God.
Oh, yeah.
And I went, and oh God, there's a lot of documents. A lot of people. But there's so many doctors. And the doctors were doing experiments. They were I didn't realize this. So they were checking, for example, the planes at the altitude to get cold. So, the pilots will get cold. So why don't we test how, humans are to hypothermia? Yeah. So they would freeze people and observe what happened to them as they froze. Yeah. Even if it meant freezing them to death. Yeah. And then they do the opposite. Let's heat them up. Yeah. And let's watch them and see what happens. And all these, here's a new drug and let's see if that works. And let's give it, it was awful. Yeah. Absolutely. It was proper evil shit going on. Oh, let's try this new operation. Let's see if let's just mutilate this person. Let's experiment. And these were doctors carrying it out.
Yeah. And what's horrifying is that there were several injections, vaccination campaigns.
Yes. Yes.
So typhus and jaundice and So they were, investigating new vaccines on people and killing them as a result. Exactly the same stuff that's going on today. And what's horrifying was that in that case, the USA versus Karl Brandt was Hitler's own physician. And there were about 23 doctors that were brought to trial in that particular case. It's called the medical cases.
Yeah.
But in
And not
that,
all of them were found
no,
guilty.
no.
Something like 8 or 9 got off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some were life in prison, some were hanged, and some were let go.
Yes.
But basically, what the German defense was, well, you guys have all been doing this everywhere else. This is nothing new. And they produced evidence from England, from Sweden, from America, of horrific experiments that have been carried out without informed consent for like the last 300 years. So going back to the early 18th century, horrific experiments that they produced evidence of. And they said, so we're only doing what everyone else has been doing. So, you're now saying that the Germans are evil because...
It's a bit rich.
Yeah, it's a bit rich. And so what the court actually said was, well, okay, given there's already a code of medical ethics, which clearly you're not upholding, and there is also live human experimentation, which some people are saying is ethical, some people aren't, then it's the court's job to determine what is the current state of medical ethics and what is the state of human experimentation. And they hired 2 experts, and they came out with the 6 principles of the Nuremberg Code, but the court added 4 more. And they said that is the set of principles that are currently in existence at the time in 1945, 1946, that we will judge the doctors against. The Nuremberg Code wasn't a new set of principles. That's really important for people to understand. The American Medical Association had already put in place a code of medical ethics. I think it was 1848.
So can I read it out to you? What the code is?
And the first one's the most important, I think.
Yeah. So first one is voluntary consent is essential. The results of any experiment must be for the greater good of society. Number 3, human experiments should be based on previous animal experimentation. 4, experiments should be conducted by avoiding physical, mental suffering and injury. 5, no experiments should be conducted if it's believed to cause death or disability. 6, the risks should never exceed the benefits. 7, adequate facilities should be used to protect subjects. 8, experiments should be conducted only by qualified scientists. 9, subjects should be able to end their participation at any time. 10, the scientists in charge must be prepared to terminate the experiment when injury, disability, or death is likely to occur.
So all 10 points are being breached.
Yeah.
And we've just identified why, because nobody's ever read it. You weren't taught it at medical school. Most of the doctors I've spoken to have said the same thing. So
doesn't this just bring the whole idea of lest we forget into just a mockery?
It does.
So I said recently to Jason Gardner, who's on my podcast here, I said, I'm going to be that really annoying guy who goes quiet for a bit, and just when everybody thinks, especially the government, that, COVID's over, no one, I'm going to just bring it back up again. I'm going to resurrect it. I'm going to be that annoying guy at the party because, that COVID thing was crazy, wasn't it? Everybody, because no one wants to talk about it. Everybody wants to bury it. And, we have Remembrance Day, Poppy Day, Holocaust Memorial. Why do we have all these things? So we don't repeat the same mistakes.
Exactly.
So guess what? I'm going to be that annoying git that just doesn't let go.
Yeah, exactly. And people say the Nuremberg Code isn't law, but that's not true either. Because first of all, it's enshrined in that case I've just cited, USA versus Karl Brandt et al., which is case law. It's international criminal case law. It's binding. Okay, so it has to be considered in all future judgments based on the same kind of area of law. It's also been enshrined in various bits of law since. So the Helsinki Declaration, as you say, in this country, it's the Medicines for Human Use regulations. It's in the Schedule 1 at the back there because it's part of good clinical practice. It's been enshrined in various things like the Oviedo Convention. That was another one that sets out massive more detail about
Never heard of
consent.
that before.
Yeah, the Oviedo Convention. I think it was 1995. So, since Nuremberg, 1945, 6, 7, we've had decades more laws just firming up informed consent and medical experimentation.
Do you think that's crazy we don't talk about it?
Yeah.
Do you think it's crazy that medics aren't taught this?
I think it's absolutely astounding.
I mean, if I was a dean of the medical school and I was going through the curriculum, I'd be like, right, first of all, lesson number 1, all the shit that we did in the past that was stupid and dumb and wrong and reckless, okay? Because you learn from your mistakes, don't you? Don't you? Is that not?
That's the idea.
Isn't it?
Generally.
Isn't it, better to, you should learn from your mistakes, but even better, learn from other people's mistakes. No?
Yeah,
the wiser
exactly,
person?
Yeah.
So that's number 1 lesson. Have a bit of humility. And number 2, go through all of these things like the Nuremberg Code, and all the Helsinki protocols and whatever, human rights, just grind it down. That they know the importance of this, what medical ethics actually means, and then start teaching about nutrition, holistic healthcare, alternative healthcare, integrative healthcare, homeopathy, chiropractors, physiotherapy, and then, allopathic medicine and surgery and drugs. And, so they come out really well-rounded individuals, and they can be healers as opposed to legalized drug pushers and jabbers.
Yeah.
That's what I would do if I was dean of the medical school.
Yeah, absolutely. And reintroduce the Hippocratic Oath. Because again, that's been forgotten about in most places. Apparently most doctors now don't swear any kind of oath.
No, I didn't do it. I graduated in 98. I didn't do it. My wife graduated 10 years later in Oxford. She didn't do it. No, doesn't happen.
And why? Why would you not be asked to swear that oath? What would be the reason?
Good question.
How does it serve anyone for you not to swear that oath? And that's why, again, when people say the Nuremberg Code doesn't apply, I'm like, what's your agenda? Why would anyone seek to try and say that it doesn't apply? It's for everybody's benefit.
I heard that a lot in the midst of COVID. I heard that, it's not an experiment. Why are you saying it's not an experiment? And it was an experiment. Even, this guy, Eden Bieber's just done a piece on it showing that the AstraZeneca vaccine was actually undergoing a trial at the time of the rollout. Phase 3 trial. You can look it up. So if there's a trial going on with the drug, surely that means it's an experiment still.
Exactly.
Doesn't it, by definition?
Absolutely.
Hello? Yeah. But if you said this is an experiment, you were labelled a quack and a conspiracy theorist. And then when you said, but what about our bodily autonomy and human rights and, no, Nuremberg Code. I'd be like, Nuremberg Code, you conspiracy theorists. It's like, the problem is you couldn't reason with these people. They would just give you the most ridiculous response back. And you were just like, what? Like, what am I meant to do with that? It's just madness.
It is. It is madness. And as I say, the way I call them out is to say, where were you taught law? Because if you've taught yourself, how do you know you're right? How can you say you're so right and be so adamant? Because you're a layperson teaching yourself incredibly complex area of law.
Tell me about your regulatory body now.
Solicitors Regulation Authority.
That's it.
Yeah.
Are they acting like the GMC? Because the GMC is part of the Privy Council. I didn't know this, by the way.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, GMC is part of the Privy Council. Look into it. Yeah. A lot of the people in the GMC are civil servants, political appointees. Very few doctors, by the way. I have like 100 people. There's like 2 doctors or whatever.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's the extension of the government, Privy Council. And they've now, as far as I'm concerned, they're not doing their job. And they're just acting as an arm of the government. And now they're an enforcer, making sure all doctors stay in line. And if you are a dissident or you go against a narrative, you get punished.
Yeah, but it's staying in line against their own
it doesn't matter.
Code.
It doesn't matter.
Their own code says you have to whistleblow and you have a duty of candor and patient safety first, etc.
So, but it doesn't matter. So I threw that at the face of the medical directors when they said to me, I did this video saying these vaccines are causing harm. We need to investigate this biggest experiment that's ever done on mankind. And within 24 hours, they'd emailed me 2 national medical directors saying, you've breached our policy, social media policy guidelines. Stop talking about this. Withdraw the video. If you keep talking about this, we're going to have further investigations and review your practicing privileges. I mean, that's
outrageous.
It's outrageous, right?
Yeah.
And I threw back at them the GMC. I was like 22, 23 or 23, 24. I can't remember. It's like, it's good medical practice that you should raise safety patient concerns. And are you telling me not to do this? And they just went, we revert to our original email. That was their response. What is that?
Justify it.
And these are medical directors. Their duty is to make sure doctors are practicing medicine safely in accordance with GMC guidelines.
Exactly.
But they felt so confident that they would be, they referred me to the GMC saying, oh, he's an anti-vaxxer or he's this and that. Instead of applauding me and saying, well done, Ahmed, for raising this concern. Well done for being brave enough to do this and pat on the back. It's like, don't slap on the wrist. Don't you dare do this again. You're going to get into trouble, Buster. I mean, what was that?
That's outrageous. I've just been shocked by how the GMC have been behaving.
But is the SRA not the same? Is Lois Bayless not got into trouble?
Well,
how have they been? Are they more balanced?
I can't obviously speak on behalf of Lois in terms of but in terms of me, I was reported to the SRA by apparently 5 members of the public who didn't like my action at the vaccine clinic.
Anonymous?
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to know who they were. I wasn't allowed to see their complaint. I was just told that they had made a complaint, and that the complaint was essentially that I was bringing the profession into disrepute. And I think harassment was in there or
So
whatever.
listen, I do wonder whether this is a government thing. So the same thing happened to me. 5 anonymous complaints from the public, no names. I didn't get to see anything about what their complaints were or anything. Saying that I'm not safe and I'm dangerous and I'm a transphobe and blah blah blah. And they use that as a pretext to investigate me.
Yeah, well,
It seems like a certain playbook here.
Yeah, it took them 18 months to investigate me. And I kept making the same point. First of all, I didn't think they had jurisdiction over me, because I made the point that actually when I was attending the vaccine clinic, I went there as an army officer. I was going there because, as far as I was concerned, these were breaches of the law of warfare, and I had a duty to stop that. And also at the time, there was the police had said that they were investigating it. They'd issued a crime reference to Lois Bayliss and to Philip Highland and Sam White on Mark Sexton on the 21st of December. And so it was a still live investigation when I went to the clinic. So I made that point as well. And I also made the point that it was freedom of speech and opinion and expression, that I was entitled to give my views. And ultimately, they backed down and agreed that I was just exercising my right of freedom of expression. But it was very interesting when I talked to the investigators, because the first person wasn't even a lawyer. And I'd assumed he was. And I was, on this hour-long call with him, going into the legal framework and saying, you don't have jurisdiction and the law isn't being upheld. And I'm doing my job, upholding the rule of law and administering justice, which I'm supposed to be doing. In the end, I said, well, you're going to have to put a lawyer on this case if you can't understand the legal framework that I'm talking to you about. So then they appointed a lawyer, but she was a 10-year more junior lawyer than me. She was a property lawyer. And again, I took her through the law and she didn't know most of it, which she had to admit. And I said, guys, this isn't on. And I said, what about, there are 68, 70 million people in the country, and you've apparently received 5 complaints. What about all the people who think what I'm doing is fantastic?
Yeah.
So obviously I got people to write in to say that they were supporting me, including other military people. And I think they had to back down. So at one point I did actually say to them, let's have it out. Let's go to court. Come on, let's just have it all out in court, and I'll present all my evidence as to why I'm doing what I'm doing, and you can present yours, and let's have it out. They didn't want to do that.
Nice. Gutsy. So it's funny, I had people write in as well to the GMC and the medical director saying, I was doing a great job, we love what he's doing, he's so brave, he's ethical, he's blah, blah, blah. And the GMC wrote back saying, we don't deal with stuff like this. It doesn't matter. All they're interested in is complaints. Isn't that strange that they don't care to hear about whether you're a great doctor or not? The angle is, what have you got anything on this person? And the medical directors were the same. They're like, well, thanks for telling us, but who cares?
To be fair to the regulators, they have a duty to investigate if they've received the complaint. So I didn't object to being investigated. They were doing their job. It was just how they were doing it that I objected to. And the fact that, as I say, you and I were both doing what our regulators required us to do, which was to whistle-blow our concerns.
I think they're all captured though now. That's a problem.
Yeah.
I don't trust them.
No, it's the same with all the regulators, it transpires. Didn't the GMC receive World Economic Forum funding?
Did it?
Bill and Melinda Gates funding? One or the other. And I know the MHRA received, 900,000 from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
I know
they're
funding.
The regulators are getting funding from
I knew it was like 70% or 80% funding for the MHRA is coming from pharma. I thought the GMT was mainly the government and, doctors giving
Have a look into it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It seems to be the same with all the regulators. They're all being bought off and compromised and have conflicts of interest.
Okay, so in summary, what would you recommend to the listeners in terms of understanding the law and their rights?
Well, one of the things I would be a big fan of is having human rights taught to kids in schools. I think it's something that could be easily taught to them. You could have assemblies or, little plays and interactions on freedom of speech, for example, or freedom of protest, and teach it to them at a very young age so that, they grow up as a good citizen, knowing the fundamentals of human rights and respecting it, because that would take them on into all of their future careers. But in terms of the medical profession, I think the public needs to demand, first of all, formal training by lawyers and informed consent, and then some kind of certification process. I'm told that some medical schools have this. But, there needs to be some kind of license that you can show, yes, I've done this course, I understand it, I'm able to give proper informed consent to my patients. And as a patient, you could ask to see that doctor's license in informed consent, for example. And I think, demanding that the state complies with its undertaking in the human rights instruments to promote, respect, and uphold human rights. So they've got to be doing that in all regards, and they're not doing that. So again, that would be letters to the MP, talking about it on social media, making demands. Schools, saying to the schools, you're part of that undertaking, you're a state body, you should be teaching human rights. And I think, as an individual, doing the research I've said, go onto legislation.gov.uk, read the Magna Carta 1297. It's there.
I'm going to read it. I'm going to read
it. And people say, oh, it's in Old English. Yes, it is. But, if you take it one word at a time, it's really not that difficult. Bill of Rights, Human Rights Act, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the European Commission Human Rights, and the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. I say everyone should read those documents, and they would be an awful lot better informed.
So where do we find, is it legislation.gov.uk?
Yeah.
All right, I'm just going to share my screen so we can see that. I'm going to type it in as we speak.
And as I say, the great thing about the Magna Carta is it specifically says it binds everyone in the country. And any law that's created that goes against it is null and void and of no effect.
It's there.
Yeah.
Magna Carta.
It exists.
1297,
yeah.
Introductory text, everything.
I wasn't lying, was I?
No. Oh, wow.
I know, I've printed it out before and taken it with me into town hall meetings to prove to people, look, the Magna Carta, it exists, I promise you.
Oh, wow, there you go. Edward, by the grace of God, King of England, Lord of Ireland. Oh, it's all there.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
When the Magna Carta was first produced, apparently copies were sent all across the land and loads of people used to have it, in their back pocket. And they used to bring it out and read it to people. And I've said to people, again, you can print that off. What is it, 4 pages or something? The Magna Carta? Just print it off and carry it around with you and quote it to people. Let them see their argument.
But will it stand in court?
Why wouldn't it? It's a piece of primary legislation, and it specifically says it's statute and common law.
I'm going to read it later on tonight. Okay, this is a difficult question. I was struggling to think whether I should ask it or not, but it's my signature question. I don't think you know this. Do you know I've got a signature question at the end?
Know.
I feel a bit comfortable saying this because you've been battling cancer.
Yeah.
This is my signature question. I don't want to treat you any differently, though.
Okay, go on.
So you're on your deathbed many, many years from now.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's pray. Yeah.
Pray. Many, many years from now. And you're surrounded by your loved ones. And before you pass on and meet your maker, what words of wisdom and advice would you give to them?
I always think that you always remember how someone makes you feel, not what they say or do, but how you feel when you're with them. And so my advice to my children would be make people feel wonderful when you're with them. Make them feel loved, make them feel nurtured and listened to and cared for.
That's a goddamn beautiful answer. I've had about 190 people here now. No one's given that answer before.
Oh.
That's very unique. A lot of people say question everything and this and that. That's a good... I like that.
Well, I just think we're here for such a short time and we're here with each other, sharing this journey. And we've got to make it as lovely as possible for each other. As kind, as caring, as nurturing, as, educational as we can. Getting each other through our very short lives together.
This is just a little, I don't know, simulation. I'm sure at the end of it, I don't mean that, but I mean once this is over, and we die, I bet we're like, how did I score in that one? How did I do? Did I pass?
Well, here's another piece of law for you. There's something called Confession of Faith Ratification Act, 1690.
1690?
Yeah. It's still current binding statute law. and it sets out the confession of our faith, what we believe in. And chapter 30 is all about the Last Judgment. And it says that when we die, we will be at Christ's tribunal and we will receive the final judgment.
This is what I'm talking about.
And I think, for all of those people who think they're getting away with whatever they're getting away with here on earth, I'm a great believer that they will face that final judgment.
I'm a great believer in that. I really do. I think even if you don't get the justice here, I'm sorry, I do believe in a life after. I cannot believe that this is all just random coincidence. The more I studied medicine, the intricacy of our body and nature and the cells and the bees and the flowers and how everything just works in harmony, to think that this is all just random? No.
Doesn't add up to me
look,
at all.
Mr. and Mrs. Duck have visited.
Oh, that's so
They're a
cute.
honeymoon couple. They keep visiting. I just thought I'd tell you, Mr. and Mrs. Mallard. Aren't they
so
cute?
sweet.
And oh god, she's a newbie though. She's a bit immature. They were sitting on a roof, right, on a ledge, and she laid an egg there, and it rolled down. My daughter and I witnessed it. It rolled down that little roof there, and it landed on the floor with a splat.
Oh.
We witnessed a death.
Oh.
We were traumatized. We were like, Mrs. Mallard,
Not the place to do an egg.
come on.
He's probably pretending it's his place.
No, so back to, I just don't believe that this is all random. Right. And if it's not random, I also like thinking that we really are these spiritual bodies. And like AJ Roberts says, we wear this meat suit.
Yeah.
Okay? It's just this temporary suit.
Love AJ.
Right? Just wearing this meat suit. And, when we die, though, this force, this energy being, you can't destroy energy. Isn't that one of the rules of physics?
Yeah, you can only transform it.
You can only transform it, right? So we're energy. And all we're going to do is transform into something else.
Yeah.
And then I want to be there when all these people come through, these bad people. I'll be watching, like, all right, come on. And they get, hope that's going to happen.
Mind you, we're going to have to answer for our mistakes as well. I'm not looking forward to that. When people talk to me about my cancer, I say that's one of my big problems with it, is I'm just not ready to meet my maker. No, I'm terrified of that.
Is it bad? Is it bad that I don't? I'm okay. I'm okay. I feel like I've just done some stupid stuff, but I've not done anything that I'm worried about.
Well, I don't know, because I'm not God, so I don't know what he will think that I've done that's... So I put myself in his shoes and I come up pretty badly,
So, okay, this is taking a strange tangent turn, but I don't subscribe to the God that I was brought up with in the Quran, which is very biblical, by the way. A lot of people don't realize this, but Muslims, 70-80% of it is, just Bible teaching.
I've been told that by my other Muslim friends as well. Yeah.
It really is. But my wife's coming out to feed the ducks. Look at that. Isn't she good? Well done. So basically, I don't think God is the God that I read in the Quran, which is a very angry God. You need to worship me and you need to fear me. And because I love my kids unconditionally, right? It doesn't matter what they do. I mean, you see the way they talk to me, and I just love them. They're
gorgeous.
But I'm just their dad. I'm just a human being, and I love them so much. God must feel that and an exponential level more. So when you come through the gates and he goes, all right, Anna de Buisseret, and you're like, oh God, I'm really, really sorry. Yeah, I think he would come over here, come and give you a big hug, and it'll all be just fine.
I hope so.
I think that's what God's going to be like.
I pray for that.
I don't think God's going to be this angry.
Well, he's never been an angry God as far as I'm aware. I've had a relationship with him ever since I can remember, since I was a tiny child. And he's never been an angry, vicious God. He's always been very understanding, firm, and doesn't let you off stuff, tells you when you got it wrong. But it's very loving and understanding and compassionate.
And that's why I always had a problem with the Quran when I read it, because the God that I felt in my heart was a kind, caring, loving protector God.
Yeah.
Not this, you need to worship me.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're damned to hell. There was this, dissonance. I was like, no, this doesn't, I don't feel that.
Yeah.
I think if I miss prayers tonight, God will be like, not, oh.
No, I agree. I totally agree, actually. And I feel sad for people who've had experience of an angry God, because I just never have. And the angry God I read about in the Bible, I think, well, that's before Jesus came along, right? So as I understand it, Jesus changed him a lot. He helped him understand what it's like to be human.
Yeah. Now we're getting really philosophical. Anyway, I'll just keep it simple. I just believe in just God.
Yeah. But I think that's why the oath is so important. Because in the days when everybody did believe in God and did believe in the final judgment day, they knew that they would be held to account for their oath. And that's why the wording of the oath finished with, "So help me God."
Yeah.
So help me, comma, God. You know, I need help, and only you are going to help me keep up with this oath. And I think that's so important. And of course, you know, now that people don't believe in God and don't believe in oaths, where does that leave us?
Lawlessness, like you said. And it's also, you know, there's a time when your word
was your bond.
Was your bond.
Yeah.
You know?
An Englishman's word was his contract, was his bond.
Right. I'm a man of my word.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, where's that gone? So just like you said, I think the godlessness, and it's funny, I don't know how to explain this. We've lost God, but we've replaced it with many other gods.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
We've lost the God, and I don't care what you call the name,
Yeah.
you know, someone was telling me, you know, for example, you know, it's all the same. Like, you know, as Allah, you know, in Arabic is like Elijah or whatever. You know, it's all the same. Like whatever the name you, let's just use God, right? God's now not there anymore in people's minds, but there are other gods of celebrity and your phone, social media, the religions and cults of climate change or vaccinology. Even the NHS is a cult.
Yeah.
The people worship the NHS.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? It's just weird now, you know?
The vaccine being like the golden calf.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Worship
totally.
at the altar of the vaccine.
Well, I have to say, I'm 58, so I was born in 1965. And when I went to school, we still had, assembly every day where we sang hymns and we, had a reflection on some kind of life lesson. And then we had Sunday school where we were taught God's commandments and God's judgments. And so even if we weren't being taught human rights law or constitutional law or the Magna Carta, we were at least learning, the Old and New Testament judgments and commandments. That's all gone out of the window now as well. So again, where are people learning any of their ethics and morals?
I had the same assemblies. It was the same. Anyway, right, listen, it's getting late. I really appreciate you coming all this way in your big blue van.
Everyone, I drive a massive big blue Sprinter van. It's a camper van. And everyone's always surprised at how big it is.
No, it's been wonderful having you. You know, like I said, one of the very few. I mean, from a percentage point of view, you're like 0.0001% of lawyers.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for doing what you've done. You know, you've been out there from day one. You're one of the original freedom fighters. Like so many people say, you know, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get Anna. And her megaphone, and she was. Oh, they love you, and you know, you've got a lot of respect. People know you've been consistent. Yeah, I'm late to the party. You're early to the party. You're there from day dot, and you've been fighting. And God bless you. You know.
Oh, well, thank you for that recognition.
I mean it.
It wasn't easy.
You're a wonderful human being, and I know it wasn't. Weren't you arrested or something as well? Or
no, I've never been arrested. Actually,
something happened that wasn't it?
Well, no, I mean I've been, faced down the police a few times.
That's it.
Where I've been, they've been looking at me like they're going to arrest me, but they haven't actually arrested me because they couldn't. No, I hadn't done anything wrong really. So,
but I think there's a picture with a lot of police officers all around you or something. Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. But you've got courage and strength, and
well, I'm an army officer, right? I mean, goodness, if I didn't have courage and strength, why on earth would I have been given a commission?
What was your rank?
Oh, lieutenant.
Nice. Yeah, I was a captain.
Oh, were you? I wanted to stay in, but I got married. I would have stayed in.
So I wanted to stay in the TA, but a number of reasons. So I was about to go to Sandhurst for my officer training. I did basic training and everything. But then two things happened. One, my back was awful. I ended up getting caught equina. I just physically couldn't carry the, backpacks and the burgers were in the kit. It was just too much. And they wanted you to do all that in the Sandhurst. I was like, oh my God, my back's killing me. I ended up getting caught equina. Two, I was also very disillusioned because I joined after 9/11 thinking, patriotic. But then actual troopers were telling me, oh, it's all building number 7, it's all a hoax, it's a scam. And they were laughing at, is that the reason why you joined? I was like, yeah. They're like, well, you joined for the wrong reasons then, because we're just a global mercenary force and we're waging war in places actually that never did anything. And I think that was my first awakening moment where I was like, what? Like, what? I just didn't get it. But yeah, I was
shocking.
I was in the TA.
Oh, I didn't realise that. That's the first time I've heard that. Oh,
Captain
well done,
Malik.
you.
Captain Malik. Well done. Anyway, listen, thank you so much once again, Anna. And like I said, I'll put all the details of your GoFundMe or
Give, Send, Go.
Give, Send, Go.
Yeah.
Right. Give, Send, Go. And hopefully you'll get your Substack up and running. And after we finish this, I'm going to just show you my Substack and how you upload and everything. It's really good.
Brilliant.
Okay. All right. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. God bless you all.
Thank you.